How's it going? Thursday, August 5th, 2021, about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I want to devote an episode, and you've heard a lot if you've listened to my episode guide, 238 episodes on baseball players in the Hall of Fame. You've heard me made mention of the terms old school versus new school baseball. What do I mean? I think players from the 1870s until about, I would say, 1950, those are old school baseball players, and their stats were remarkable and astounding. The new school players, I'd say from 1951 through 2021. So we have about, 150 years of baseball, and I divided it in 75 years each. Old school started around 1871. I came across some stats, and let's see what you think, okay? Did you know there are 65 Hall of Fame players from 1871 to 1950? 65 of them had a career batting average over 300. Did you know that? I'll list them. Ty Cobb, 366. Roger Hornsby, 358. Ed Delante, 346. Tris Speaker, 345. Billy Hamilton, 344. Babe Ruth, 342. Harry Handelman, 342. Willie Keeler, 341. Bill Terry, 341. George Sisler, 340. Luke Gehrig, 340. Nap Lajoie, 339. Jesse Burkett, 338. Dan Brothers, 335. Al Simmons, 334. Paul Wainer, 333. Eddie Collins, 333. Cap Hansen, 331. Henny Manouche, 330. Hannes Wagner, 329. Sam Thompson, 327. Jimmy Fox, 325. Early Combs, 325. Joe DiMaggio, 325. Hugh Duffy, 324. Joe Medwick, 324. Ed Roche, 323. Sam Rice, 322. Ross Youngs, 322. Kiki Cooler, 321. Charlie Gehringer, 320. Chuck Klein, 320. Pie Trainer, 320. Mickey Cochran, 320. Earl Averill, 318. Archie Vaughn, 318. Chick Happy, 317. Joe Kelly and Zach Wheat, 317 each. Lloyd Wainer, Frank Frisch, and Goose Goslin, 316. Hank Greenberg, Elmer Flick, Bill Dickey, 313. Johnny Mize, Joe Sewell, Fred Clark, 312. Huey Jennings, Freddie Lindstrom, 311. Luke Ablin, Roger Connor, Jim Botley, 310. Sam Crawford, 309. Richie Aspern, Jake Beckley, 308. Frank Baker, Hack Wilson, Jim O'Rourke, 307. George Kell, Ernie Lombardi, 306. Billy Herman, 304. Mel Ott, 304. Joe Cronin, 301. King Kelly and Enos Slower. No, King Kelly, 301, and Enos Slower, 300 on the nose. So did you hear what I said? 65 Hall of Famers who played from 1871 to 1950 had a career batting average over 300. That's old school. Compare it with the new school players. Remember, this episode is old school versus new school. From 1951 to 2021, there are 21 Hall of Famers who had a career batting average over 300. 65 old schoolers for 75 years. And in the next 75 years, only 21. Who's better, old school or new school? Well, in batting average, you got to say old school. So here's the new school players. Career batting average over 300. Ted Williams, 344. Tony Gwynn, 338. Stan Musial, 331. Wade Broggs and Rod Carew, 328. Kirby Puckett, Vladimir Guerrero, 318. Roberto Clemente, 317. Edgar Martinez, 312. Larry Walker, 313. Derek Jeter, 310. Jackie Robinson, 311. Mike Piazza, 308. Paul Molitor, 306. Hank Aaron, 305. George Brett, 305. Chipper Jones, Pete Rose, 303. Willie Mays, 302. Frank Thomas, 301. And Roberto Alomar, 300. 65 old schoolers, old-time players from 1871 to 1950, over 300 career. Only 21 new schoolers from 1951 to 2021. That's batting average. All right, here's an interesting, as far as home runs. From 1871 to 1950, there were 4 Hall of Famers who had 400 or more home runs. Only 4. Babe Ruth, 714. Jimmy Fox, 534. Mel Ott, 511. And Lou Gehrig, 493. Those are the 4 old schoolers with 400 or more home runs. Back in the old time baseball, not as many home runs hit until Babe Ruth came along. All right, as far as new school, from 1951 to 2020, there are 27 Hall of Famers with 400 or more home runs. So the new school players have the edge on home runs. As far as batting average, it's old school players. New school, home runs. And here are the 27 with 400 or more home runs. Hank Aaron, 755. Willie Mays, 660. Ken Griffey, 630. Jim Thome, 612. Frank Robinson, 586. Harmon Killebrew, 573. Reggie Jackson, 563. Mike Schmidt, 548. Mickey Mantle, 536. Ted Williams, Willie McCovey, and Frank Thomas, 521. Ernie Banks, Eddie Matthews, 511. Eddie Murray, 504. Stan Musial and Willie Stargell, 475. Chipper Jones, 468. Dave Winfield, 465. Carl Yastrzemski, 452. Jeff Bagwell and Vladimir Guerrero, 449. Andrew Dawson, 438. Cal Ripken, 431. Mike Piazza, 427. Bernie Williams, 426. And Duke Snider, 407. So I thought that was interesting. 27 Hall of Famers, people who are in the Hall of Fame with 400 or more home runs career. Yet only 4 old-timers before 1950. Only 4 Hall of Famers with 400 or more home runs. How about that? How about runs batted in? And I marked it off at 1,500 or more. Who has the edge? Old school from 1871 to 1950, or new school from 1951 to 2021? Who do you think has the edge as far as 1,500 or more runs batted in? Who has more? Well, from 1871 to 1950, there were 16 Hall of Famers who had 1,500 or more 1,500 or more runs batted in. Babe Ruth, 2,214. Cap Anson, 2,075. Lou Gehrig, 1,995. Ty Cobb, 1944. Jimmy Fox, 1922. Mel Ott, 1860. Al Simmons, 1828. Hannes Wagner, 1732. Goose Goslin, 1612. Nap Lajoie, 1599. Roger Hornsby, 1584. Jake Beckley, 1581. Harry Heigelman, 1543. Joe DiMaggio, 1537. Tris Speaker, 1531. And Sam Crawford, 1523. So there's 16 old schoolers with 1,500 or more home runs in the Hall of Fame. How many new schoolers? Actually, there were 16. 16 old schoolers. How many new schoolers? After 1951, with 1,500 or more home runs, 1,500 or more runs batted in, they're in the Hall of Fame. There are 25. So the new schoolers have the edge on runs batted in. How about that? 25 of them. Henry Aaron, 2297. Stan Musial, 1951. Eddie Murray, 1917. Willie Mays, 1903. Carl Yastrzemski, 1844. Ted Williams, 1839. Ken Griffey, 1836. Dave Winfield, 1833. Frank Robinson, 1812. Frank Thomas, 1704. Reggie Jackson, 1702. Jim Thome, 1699. Cal Ripken, 1695. Tony Perez, 1652. Ernie Banks, 1636. Chipper Jones, 1623. George Brett, 1596. Mike Schmidt, 1595. Andrew Dawson, 1591. Harmon Killebrew, 1584. Al Kaline, 1583. Willie McCovey, 1555. Willie Stargell, 1540. Jeff Bagwell, 1529. And Mickey Mantle, 1509. All right, old school has the edge on batting average. New school has the edge on home runs. And new school has the edge on 1,500 or more runs batted in. So it's the score is new school 2, old school 1. All right, what next? How about 1,500 or more runs scored? Who has the edge? From 1871 to 1950, there are 29 Hall of Famers who scored 1,500 or more home runs. 1,500 or more runs scored. I'll go slow. 29. Ty Cobb, 2245. Babe Ruth, 2174. Cap Anson, 1999. Luke Gehrig, 1888. Tris Speaker, 1882. Mel Ott, 1859. Ed Collins, 1821. Charlie Gehringer, 1775. Jimmy Fox, 1751. Hannes Wagner, 1739. Jim O'Rourke, 1729. Jesse Burkett, 1720. Willie Keeler, 1719. Billy Hamilton, 1697. Bid McPhee, 1684. Paul Wainer, 1627. Fred Clark, 1622. Roger Connor, 1620. Jake Beckley, 1603. Ed Delonte, 1600. Roger Hornsby, 1579. Hugh Duffy, 1554. George Davis, 1545. Max Carey, 1545. Frank Frisch, 1532. Dan Brothers, 1529. Sam Rice, 1514. Al Simmons, 1507. And Nap Lajoie, 1504. Runs scored. 29 old schoolers. How many new schoolers? from 1951 to 2021. 30. So they beat them by one, the new schoolers. 30 Hall of Fame players who scored 1,500 or more runs scored. Ricky Henderson, 2295. Henry Aaron, 2174. Pete Rose, 2165. But Pete's not in the Hall of Fame. So I'm going to say I'm adding him on the list, but he's not in the Hall of Fame. So this is a tie. Old school and new school tie with 29 each. So the score is new school 2, old school 1, and 1 tie. Okay? I put Pete Rose in there because he scored 2,165 runs. You can't leave him off. Willie Mays, 2,062. Stan Musial, 1949. Derek Jeter, 1923. Craig Biggio, 1844. Frank Robinson, 1829. Carl Yastrzemski, 1816. Ted Williams, 1798. Paul Molitor, 1782. Mickey Mantle, 1676. Dave Winfield, 1669. Ken Griffey, 1662. Joe Morgan, 1650. Cal Ripken, 1647. Robin Yount, 1632. Eddie Murray, 1627. All right, let me just for this 1 second here. Okay, good. I got it. Al Kaline, 1622. Chipper Jones, 1619. Lou Brock, Lou Brock, 1610. George Brett, 15. George Brett, 1583. Okay, pardon me. Okay, I'll go on. Jim Thome, 1583. Tim Raines, 1571. Reggie Jackson, 1551. Jeff Bagwell, 1517. Wade Boggs, 1513. Eddie Matthews, 1509. Roberto Alomar, 1508. And Mike Schmidt, 1506. Total bases. Okay, so the score is new school 2, old school 1, and 1 tie as far as categories. Old school has the batting average. New school has home runs and RBI and RBI, right? And they're tied in runs scored. All right. I got that right? Let's do it again. Batting average, the old school wins. Home runs, I'll put it right here, old school 1. All right, home runs, new school wins. Runs batted in, new school wins, so 2. And then runs scored, it's a tie. Okay, so there's 1 tie. Now we're going to go to total bases. Who wins here? 19 Hall of Famers who had 4,000 or more total bases. So I could do 4,000 or 5,000. I'm going to narrow it down to 5,000. Listen to this. There are 5 players from 1871 to 1950 who are in the Hall of Fame who had 5,000 or more total bases. Ty Cobb, 5854. Babe Ruth, 5793. Tris Speaker, 5101. Lou Gehrig, 5060. And Mel Ott, 5,041. How many new schoolers from 1951 to 2020 had 5,000 or more total bases? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So New School has their third victory here. They have 10. Henry Aaron, 6,856. Woo! Stan Musial, 6,134. Willie Mays, 6,066. Pete Rose, not in the Hall of Fame, and I didn't count him, but he has 5,752. Kyle Yastrzemski, 5539. Eddie Murray, 5397. Frank Robinson, 5373. Ken Griffey, 5271. Dave Winfield, 5221. Cal Ripken, 5168. And George Brett, 5044. Okay. So I did batting average, RBIs, runs scored, and total bases. So what do you think of that? Now my last category would be hits. These are everyday players. I'll do pitching in the next episode. You want to know how many old school players had 3,000 or more hits. Old school. 3,000 or more hits. I will count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 old schoolers had 3,000 or more hits. Ty Cobb, 4189. Tris Speaker, 3514. Camp Hansen, 3435. Hannes Wagner, 3430. Eddie Collins, 3315. Nap Lajoie, 3252. Paul Wayner, 3152. 7 players with 3,000 or more hits. How many new schoolers had 3,000 or more hits? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 new schoolers. So that means New School has 4 wins, Old School has 1, and there's 1 tie. New schoolers with 3,000 or more hits. Hank Aaron, 3771. Stan Musial, 3630. Derek Jeter, 3465. Kyle Yastrzemski, 3419. Paul Molitor, 3319. Willie Mays, 3283. Eddie Murray, 3255. Cal Ripken, 3184. George Brett, 3154. Robin Yount, 3142. Tony Gwynn, 3141. Dave Winfield, 3110. Ichiro Suzuki, 3089. Craig Biggio, 3060. Ricky Henderson, 3055. Rod Carew, 3053. Lou Brock, 3023. Ray Boggs, 3010. Al Kaline, 3007. And Roberto Clemente, 3000. So what do you think of that? The new school versus old school, or old school versus new school. Who would you pick? As far as hitting, the new school players outperformed the old school players. But do remember that in the new school era, there are more available players to set the marks. There's more games played. I think it's evident that the old school players, they win in the batting average. So I think they were better hitters than the new school players, according to this analysis. As far as home runs, the new schoolers win because there's more players available. The ballparks are smaller. After 1950, they built a lot of new ballparks. In the old time, the ballparks were really large. Polo Grounds, 440 feet to straightaway center. And then you only had 4 guys that hit over 400 home runs during that era. Babe Ruth. Who was it? Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Jimmy Fox, and who was the other one? Who was the other one? Mel Ott played in the 20s. So the new schoolers win in home runs, but I think the analysis would be that there's more of them playing. Back in 1871 to 1950, not as many players playing. The amount of players playing after 1950 is double, so they win in home runs. Now, as far as runs batted in, what was the analysis there? Let's see, let me look at it again. Runs batted in. I've got it here. Forgive me, I've got my book here as my reference. As far as runs batted in, yeah, the new schoolers won by about 9. But did you notice that the old schoolers had guys doing 150 RBIs, 160, 170, Luke Gehrig, 185, and Hack Wilson, 1931 season, 191. The new schoolers, there's more players, but they're only doing about 100 RBIs or 120. So I say as run producers, I would say the old schoolers are better run producers, even though there were 9 Hall of Famers who had 1,500 or more RBIs in the new school category. But I think you got to give the edge to the old school as far as runs batted in because of what they produced. Babe Ruth had 160. I mean, Lou Gehrig had 13 seasons of over 100. Jimmy Fox had 13 seasons, so did Babe Ruth. Now, in the new school, some of the players just 8 or 9 or 10 seasons of over 100 RBIs, and then they just break the 100 RBI mark. They didn't get up to 150, 160 like some of these other guys. I'm going to give the edge to the old schooler and runs batted in. All right, runs scored. It was a tie. It was. There were 29 players each. But I'm going to give the edge to the old schoolers on runs scored. Why? Because they were scoring 100 runs every year, and there were less players playing. You following me? In the new school category, there are guys scoring 100 runs, but there's more players doing it. There's double the amount of players playing. But, I mean, come on. Willie Keeler, 190 runs scored in a season. And Babe Ruth, 2,174. Just about every season he scored 100 runs. And some of these other guys, Billy Hamilton, Fred Clark, Jesse Burkett, look how many they scored. Now in the new schoolers, Rickey Henderson, he played over 3,000 games. These other guys are only playing about 2,000 games. Do the math. The old schoolers were scoring more runs in less games. The new schoolers are scoring more runs because they're playing more games and there's more players. I'm going to give the edge to the old schoolers as far as runs scored. Sorry. And then total bases, I said 5,000 or more total bases, right? So how many did we have? We had 5. And then in the new school, we had 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So you had 11 to 5. So as far as the total bases, again, you got to factor in the home runs because that's 4 bases. And back then, a lot of the guys weren't hitting home runs. Where in the new era, they are hitting the home runs. If you have 5 versus 9, and yet the home runs kind of cut back on the bases, I'm sorry to say it, but I'm going to give the total bases to the old schoolers. I mean, Ty Cobb scored 5,854 bases, and yet he hit just over 100 home runs in his career. Hank Aaron has 6,856 bases, but he has 755 home runs because a home run to him is 4 bases, where Ty Cobb, 100 home runs. See, 100 home runs versus 7 home runs, you see? Yet, Ty Cobb is only 1,000 behind in bases of Henry Aaron. Stan Musial, the same thing. He hit 475 homers. Willie Mays, 600 homers. Tris Speaker and Lou Gehrig and Mel Ott, they hit a lot of home runs too. I don't know. That could be a tie. Maybe we'll give the total bases a tie. What do you think? As far as old school versus new school. And then how about the 3,000 hits? There were 7 old timers who had 3,000 or more hits, and there were 20 new timers at 3,000 or more hits. But compare the games played. I don't know. I would have to say that's a tie too. There were less guys, or the guys who got 3,000 hits did it in a certain amount of games. The 20 new schoolers who got 3,000 hits had 500 extra games, 1,000 extra games. I mean, come on, Henry Aaron. How many games did Henry Aaron play? Oh, look at this. Games played for Henry Aaron. I've got it here. Henry Aaron. How many games did he play? Hits, home runs. I've got it here. Henry Aaron played in 3,298 games. Ty Cobb played in 3,000 games. Ty Cobb has 4,189 hits. Henry Aaron has 3,771. So compare it. Aaron had more games but less hits. The old schoolers got to 3,000 hits in less games than the new schoolers in the same amount of games getting it. I'm going to give the edge to the old school. So in this episode, I focused on position players, everyday players, and I compared their batting average, their home runs, their runs batted in, runs scored, total bases, and 3,000 or more hits. And I'm going to give the edge to the old school ball players from 1871 to 1950. Now, my next episode, I will do old school versus new school in the pitching department. Who were the better pitchers, old school or new school? Okay, stay tuned for that episode. Thanks for watching. I'm out.